Did you know there is a new exhibit at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum in St. Michael's? It's called Push and Pull: Life on Chesapeake Tugboats. The exhibit highlights tugboats and the stories of the men and women who have or currently work on them. Ryan Spyros shows us more.
Tugboats have been powering the open water for centuries, maneuvering barges and guiding boats along their way. However, their important role to society is often overlooked. But the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum in St. Michael's is bringing it all to the surface with a new exhibit called Push and Pull: Life on Chesapeake Tugboats.
Tugboats is a trade that this museum, really, we've paid very little attention to. And if you look in the media in general, this is almost an invisible industry.
Pete Lesher is the chief curator of the Maritime Museum. He says many people don't realize the role tugboats still play all over the world.
So much of what happens in this maritime commerce, which is so vital to the way we get our food and our fertilizer and our road salt and everything else, happens really completely out of the public view. And we thought it was time to give it its due because it's such an important part of what happens around here on the Chesapeake Bay.
The Push and Pull exhibit opened back in April and runs for the next 2 years. Inside you will find photographs showing how a tugboat's work is never done, guiding aircraft carriers, hospital ships, and cruise lines.
We see all these big bulk carriers, the coal ships that lie waiting for their turn off the Bay Bridge before they go into Baltimore to pick up their load. They cannot get in and out of port without being assisted by 2, maybe 3 tugs each time they come in, each time they go out.
The exhibit also shows how tugboats have also had to move people. On September 11th, 2001, it was dozens of tugs that carried 500,000 people off of Lower Manhattan, away from the devastation we've all come to remember. Aside from the photos, there are also pieces of history. One in particular is from a tugboat that sank in the 1980s in part of the bay.
This log is open to the day the tug sank, June 19th, 1983, and we can see that the last entry made was 10:55 in the morning at Humper Strait Light, which was the last point that they passed. And it wasn't too long after that that she heeled over and sank. These logbooks stayed in the boat. They weren't salvaged the day of and stayed down until the boat was salvaged, and they got some marine growth on them, including some barnacles.
And then there are the interactive displays sure to get your attention.
So here inside the exhibit, you guys have this massive steam engine. Tell us about it.
Well, this is an engine that came out of a tugboat about 100 feet in length. And believe it or not, this huge engine was rated at just 700 horsepower. Today, this would be considered a small engine for a tug. But today, of course, none of the tugs are operating on steam. They're all diesel today. And the neat thing about this is that when we have a dose into the exhibit, we will operate this for the visitors. These are just workhorses. These are big power plants. They have engines that are completely outsized to the size of the boat because the engines need to do a job that's much bigger than propelling this boat. It's about pushing a barge, it's about docking a ship. They need to have lots of horsepower and be able to put it in just the right direction at just the right time.
But what also makes the exhibit so unique are the personal stories.
This is not just a story about tugboats, the towing trade or ship docking, but really about the people who've worked on these boats.
Their words and first-hand accounts all on display. Lesher says a tremendous amount of research was done to bring everything together. And what's more impressive, it was all done in the span of just 6 months. The museum wanted to be sure and open the exhibit in 2012, all because of this tug here, the Delaware.
This boat, Delaware, is 100 years old this year, and she's the reason we opened the exhibit this year.
The Delaware was built to tow sailing vessels and barges along the Nanticoke River. Built in Sussex County in the town of Bethel, the tug eventually was used by a construction company to transport equipment and then ended up at the Maritime Museum in St. Michael's. The Delaware has since been restored and is still powerful enough to be the driving force behind an entire exhibit that's giving credit where credit's due.
It's about the stories of the people who were involved in this trade, who operated these tugs on all those boring days and all those moments of excitement.
And speaking of the Tug Delaware, it celebrated its centennial in Bethel, where it was originally built. And that push and pull exhibit in St. Michael's is open through 2014. Well, from the water to the road, more than 100 truckers going to make their way through parts of Delaware this weekend to support Special Olympics, and you can join them. It is going to be something to see. We're going to tell you how next.